Welcome to the number 12 team in this deep dive series covering the Atlanta Hawks and what a season they had. First of all, just going over their odds last year, they were predicted to win 34.5 games, had a plus 1,000 odd of winning the championship. Basically, in a 72 game season, the entire betting spread of Las Vegas said the Atlanta Hawks, they're going to be a sub 500 team. They're going to miss out on the playoffs, or they're going to make the play-in tournament, and they're going to stink. And what a run these guys had. They made it past the first round. They made it past the number 1 seeded Philadelphia 76ers, and they pushed the Milwaukee Bucks, the NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks, to 6 games. And while it was a quote-unquote fluke run, or whatever you want to call it, you can only beat the teams that are in front of you, and the Hawks handled their business. Now, I personally said they had no chance against the Knicks. I was wrong. The Knicks were horrible. Their offense was terrible. Tom Thibodeau should have been fired for that abhorrent offense that he ran. But Julius Randle and company had no answer for Trey Young. Then they went up against the Sixers, and I still think the Sixers had no chance if they just played everything straight up. Everybody was 100% healthy. It took Joel Embiid to have a small tear in his meniscus, meaning best case scenario, he's limited in practice, limited in game, limited, on the exercise bike. And the entire time he's playing, there's a significant chance that he can re-aggravate that knee. It took Ben Simmons to have a literal mental collapse of the year and hit a rarely seen rock bottom, the likes of the Warriors blowing a 3-1 lead or Cliff Paul losing every single time he's in the playoffs. It took a career rock bottom to where Ben Simmons is saying, I'm never going to play for this team again, for the Hawks to beat the 76ers. And it took Joel Embiid quietly, a lot of people didn't notice this because Ben Simmons was too busy running away from a dunk, for Joel Embiid to choke multiple times in the playoffs when his team needed a bucket. But all that being said, like I stated in the beginning of this soliloquy, the Atlanta Hawks handled their business, and what an impressive season they had. Last year, they finished 41-31, 5th in the Eastern Conference. They were 12th in the final end of regular season, but not end of the playoffs power ranking systems that I use. Of course, if you look at the power rankings, they probably would come in, 4th maybe. And this upcoming season, they barely made any moves. I have major offseason moves in quotation marks because they know that this team is good enough and they're going to run it back. They lost minimal talent at best, brought in a couple nice players, and backed up the positions that they need. Now they're running 2-3 positions deep at each position. They got rid of Chris Dunn. He played like 4 games for them, so it's not really a big deal that they're losing him. I talked about him more on the Grizzlies video, but he's a good defender. He just never really panned out in the NBA. They got rid of Bruno Fernando, a guy who got outworked by the rookie and just never really stepped up to the plate. They got rid of Tony Snell, good riddance, and they brought in number 20 overall pick Jalen Johnson, Sharif Cooper, somebody who should have gone in the first round, and DeLon Wright, a quality backup combo guard at the position that they need the most help with in backup guard. Whenever Trey Young would go off the court, the offense would stall. But let's talk about Trey Young. Let's talk about this point guard ranking where they're going to come in at 7th. And now I will fully admit, I was initially a hater about Trey Young. He reeked of that Colin Sexton stench. Too little to play defense, too ball dominant, not winning offense. And while the Nate McMillan 5th seed Hawks were a nice story, I couldn't really imagine anything coming for them. Then the 2021 playoffs happened, and I was not only stunned by the Hawks, I was stunned by how much Trae embraced that underdog role, how much he embraced that villain role, how much he embraced being the leader of the Atlanta Hawks, and how the whole team responded to him. The team gravitated towards him. Normally an undersized shooting college superstar doesn't get respect in the league and from his teammates. And before last season, Trae was well on his way to NBA stat-stuffing obscurity. But whatever Coach McMillan said to him or did, it worked. Because I was watching some of his older games where they were still being coached by Lloyd Pierce, and the difference between the two is stark. Trae perfected his floater. He really bullied defenses, keeping the screen defender on his hip well, pushing the drop coverage as far back as possible until the big was forced to commit either to the rolling guy or to Trae, and then Trae would immediately recognize and deliver the alley-oop or the floater as needed and would convert his floater at a ridiculous rate. He stopped jacking up threes. He would shoot like 10 threes a game at not great shooting numbers. He just learned to let the game come to him. And surprisingly, he's a pretty bad three-point shooter given his reputation, only shot 34%. Now that number does go up when he's a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, but that never happens because he always has the ball. But it's just an interesting tidbit that this guy, we think, oh, Steph Curry and Trey Young, the best shooters in the NBA. He's shooting below average by a significant amount. Also, the foul baiting. He is a ridiculous flopper, but it works for him. Can you really blame him? I guess so, it's not really a foul, but we're going to bail you out with the foul call anyway because your famous calls, those James Harden benefit of the doubt fouls. And he really learned how to initiate contact that looks bad on the defender, but was really initiated by him. His being so small plays to his advantage. He's like the little brother on the playground, and all the other NBA players are the big, mean older brothers with huge muscles. It is going to be interesting to see how he plays with the new rules coming up in this season. He is also elite in the pick and roll, almost always made the right play, whether it was to float, alley-oop, or kick to an open shooter. He read the floor incredibly well in the playoffs, and he has some mean dribble moves, evidenced by his 5 crossover game winner against the Knicks. He's a sneaky good, accurate passer, and he signed that super mega contract extension, and I think he's fully worth it for this team. That once formerly lopsided swap between Luka Doncic and Trey Young, everybody's like, Trey Young, yeah, he's a fine young player, but Luka was the real steal of the draft. Well, now it's starting to look a little more even. Not only in that swap did they get Trey Young, who's more suited to the culture. Luka fits perfectly in Dallas, where Dirk Nowitzki played, where Kristaps Porzingis is, but the ATL needs Trey Young. They also picked up draft capital that became Cam Reddish. So with the addition of Cam Reddish, and while each player has their own strengths and weaknesses, Trey Young has brought his team to the Eastern Conference Finals now, while Luka Doncic has been out in the first round twice to the Clippers. So at this present time, you could even make the argument that Trey Young has had the better career than Luka Doncic. Now, the only thing against Trae is that his defense is hilariously bad. He'll usually do his best to hide on the spot-up shooters in the corners, and the second his guy gets the ball or posts up, he turns his head to look, and the entire Atlanta defense, most notably Clint Capella, will shade his way. Trae doesn't even try to play on-ball defense, and Clint Capella's impact on this team is huge. It's almost like Rudy Gobert to the Jazz. His rim protection and shot blocking eliminates blow-bys and poor defense by the other Hawks players, most notably Trey Young. I almost made a video complaining about how the Knicks didn't attract Trey Young enough and watch film of the side-by-side comparison of how LeBron attacked Steph Curry in those 3-1 finals and how teams should be bullying Trey Young. I just wasn't able to find the time to make this work, but whenever teams were playing against Trey Young, whenever they started to bully him on defense, they usually got a really good shot or a really good look at the basket. So at this point, defense is always going to be a major liability in Trey Young's game, but with the team as presently constructed with the DeAndre Hunter, with the Clint Capella, with the John Collins, everybody is able to bail him out, and it isn't a significant issue yet. They also brought in, like we mentioned, DeLon Wright. I guess he's going to be the backup point guard. Even though he isn't a point guard, he's more of a slashing combo guard with some passing ability. He quietly had kind of a career year last year, and he's just entering his prime at 29 years old. He averaged 10 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 37% from the three-point line. Kind of good numbers if you look at it in the abstract. That said, most of his time in Sacramento came when De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton sat out, and his playing time was either in Sacramento, the worst everything in the NBA, or in Detroit, the second worst record in the NBA. So what is he really going to bring to this team, this backup point guard role? I guess some slashing ability. The one thing that he does have that Sharif Cooper doesn't have, that Trey Young doesn't have, is that he has height and defensive ability. So at the very least, you're not going to become a defensive liability every single time your point guard brings the ball up the floor. Moving on to Sharif Cooper, the Atlanta Hawks second round pick. He's currently on a 2-way deal. I really expect him to come in somewhere in the middle of the season and take up those backup point guard duties. I don't think Skylar Mays really has what it takes to be a backup point guard in the NBA. But as for Sharif Cooper, I was really high on him. He was 20th on my big board. Now, I do rank my guys a little differently than other scouts who have tattooed on their fucking foreheads, 3-pointers are the only thing that matters. Even when I first started setting up this deep dive, I had him at point guard too because I didn't realize the Hawks only left him on the 2-way contract. The Hawks are so lacking in backup point guard role, I thought they were going to immediately insert Sharif Cooper into the lineup, but it looks like they'll take their time with him. I have no problem with that, but he does fill a major need for their team. He fits being on the same team as Trey Young so well as an undersized passer. The only difference is Sharif Cooper can't shoot for nothing. That 22.8% three-point average was atrocious, and that was on high volume. He's going to struggle heavily on defense just like Trey Young, but he does pass well like Trey Young. He can run the offense and be an elite pick-and-roll ball handler. He was the best passer in the NBA draft class this 2021 season. Now, I was watching some other analysts break down Sharif Cooper and the Atlanta Hawks roster in preparation for this with some really fucking idiotic takes like, I have no idea why Sharif Cooper fell so far. Or, the NBA is so dumb, lol. I'm so smart. What a steal it was to pick up Sharif Cooper in the second round. Sharif Cooper did not, quote unquote, strangely fall to pick 48 for no reason. He fell because A, he's 6'1" in shoes. We do the conventional wisdom of NBA players usually add about 2 inches to their height because of their sneakers, plus they want to appear taller, plus Sharif Cooper has his goofy, puffy hair, and you have to say Sharif Cooper is probably closer to a 5'10", 5'11" undersized point guard, not to mention his tiny 6-foot wingspan. B, he's awful at defense. Part height related, part only being 180 pounds related, part effort related. He was a bust defensively. His game was primary ball handler, so scouts didn't really place an emphasis on defense for point guards that run the entire offense, but even then it was still an issue. He had an overall D grade on defense, and every time his guy had the ball, it was a walking mismatch. And lastly, C, the obvious point, he sucks at three-pointers, especially somebody who is already a year older than most other rookies at 20. His 22.8 three-point percentage was atrociously bad, not to mention his awful shot form where he tilts his head back like he's taking a shot at tequila. But in today's emphasize, over-prioritize three-point shooters and floor spacing NBA, to the point where reigning Defensive Players of the Year and winner 3 out of 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, Rudy Gobert is called a mediocre player because you probably can't win with him because he doesn't shoot the three, is getting shit on for not being able to shoot. A big man not shooting is one thing. Your primary ball handler, your point guard, not being able to shoot is a whole nother. My blurb on Sharif Cooper was, Cooper is an elite passer already, learning his team's tendencies quickly and able to initiate the Auburn offense in half of a freshman year due to investigation that he was forced to sit out. I'm willing to say he's the best passer of the class. He should model his game after Trey Young, another mini-sized point guard, and continue his incredible pick-and-roll skills. He picks defenses apart with supreme vision, making the right pass almost every play. He's incredible, speedy, and can blow by almost anyone, and even displayed some floater game that will become necessary as defenses drop off him. He must have thrown some 6 perfect alley-oops every single game. He has a decent handle, but will get careless with the ball at times or throw it away or dribble it across to the other team. His shot is atrocious. He leans all the way back, like looking up in the sky and pushing the ball away like a medicine ball. And this shot form is absolutely going to need to be rebuilt at the next level. Despite a solid free throw percentage, 22% from 3 will never cut it, especially for somebody his size. He will also need a mid-range pull-up game to punish sagging defenders. Driving, he's great. He's initiating contact well. He can draw fouls. He almost shot 9 free throws a game, but once again, his size will limit the ceiling of his ability to finish in the paint when there are other shot blockers. He has a very good first step. His defense is lackluster because of the combination of won't do and can't do. He misses a lot of cuts, ball watching, or just being lazy as it's not a priority to him. He gives up on drives and he frequently falls down trying to draw a charge that refs ignore, most likely because of his low effort on defense. He does have quick, active hands when he wants to, but overall he's going to be a mismatch on the defensive end in the NBA. He might just be too little for the next level, but the way modern teams fail to take advantage of Trey Young, it makes me think he has a spot in this league on the right team. He's got great foot speed and quickness, but the verticality and strength leave you wanting. The question is, does he have the intangibles of Trey Young? Will his teams forgive the lack of defenses and rally around Cooper to be their play initiator? I didn't like his body language at Auburn. He came off as spoiled and bratty, frequently hanging his shoulders, and rarely was he ever fired up or having his team cheer him on or vice versa. So I'm just unsure on Sharif Cooper, the prospect. But I do think this match is perfect for the Atlanta Hawks. Most of the mock drafts, I had Sharif Cooper going to the Atlanta Hawks just because the match made too much sense. But let's move on to the wing positions where they're going to come in at 17th for the shooting guard, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Now, this team is lacking in shot creators for others. They have Trey Young, who can create for others to some extent. Then they have Bogey, Gallo, and Lou Will, who can all create for themselves, but nobody really sets their teammate up, which is why their offense stalled so bad whenever Trey Young went off the court. But as for Bogdanovic, he is so much better than Herter. I was kind of surprised when looking at the tape. Sometimes you forget there's levels to this game, and even on your basic, oh, he's only a 3-point scorer, Bogey can get his own shot and was an important piece for the team. I bet the Bucks wish they had him now, huh? He also struggled with injuries last year. In the playoffs, he had a big old sleeve on his leg and was all but hopping on one leg while trying to run the offense. And after coming back from an avulsion fracture that kept him out from January through March, he actually shot 45% from 3, which would have placed him 7th amongst 3-point shooters in the NBA last year. He played well for them, was absolutely cooking in the second half of the season and going into the playoffs, and was a legit second option after Trey Young for them. He goes out, he gets you buckets. He's not very athletic, but he's a good, tough shot maker. Now, my only worry for Hawks fans is I'm seeing posts of him being called a future all-star, which is a bit ridiculous, but I am a fan of his game, his ability to create. He has a really high floor, but also a really low ceiling. He is hitting his prime right now at 29 years old, so maybe the Hawks' Bogdanovic is here to stay rather than the Kings' Bogdanovic. Moving on to small forward, where they're going to come in at 11th with DeAndre Hunter. This dude was incredibly impressive to me in the playoffs. He absolutely balled out. He was a legit 3-and-D guy despite only shooting 32% last year from the three-point line. He is a Clint Capella-esque wingspan, a huge frame. And for whatever reason, teams playing against the Hawks said, yeah, let's run a DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella in the pick and roll. And the two of them with their defensive prowess shut that shit down. They stifled offenses so badly. and were pivotal to the Hawks' playoff success. They did have awful injury luck though with DeAndre. His rookie year, he played only 63 games, and then last year he only played 23 games. And just as he was starting to make a statement against the Knicks saying, "I'm here to stay," he tore up his knee. He had some knee swelling early in 2021, then got surgery, then came back March 22nd, then re-aggravated the knee and sat out, then came back for the final few games of the season, and then tore his meniscus against the Knicks. So just a really bad luck year. I'm hoping for nothing but health for DeAndre Hunter. He had surgery this offseason and is expected to start day one. So just, can he stay healthy? Can he continue to improve his shooting, because 32% isn't going to cut it? And can he continue to be a defensive stopper? I was largely impressed by him. I fully believe he won the starting job over Cam Reddish, and he has all-star, all-NBA defensive team potential this upcoming season. Moving on to John Collins, who signed a mega deal this offseason, and he's one of those borderline max players, kind of similar to Michael Porter Jr., who just signed his rookie max extension. John Collins is, and how can I say this? He's not very talented, but he's very productive and effective, if that makes sense. He's a ridiculous athlete. He is a top 10 vertical in his draft class, and he has really nice touch, shot 83% from the free throw line and almost 40% from three last year. But his shot was also very streaky and inconsistent. I was looking at his season stats because I was surprised. Oh, John Collins shoots 40% from the three-point line. The vast majority of his games are 0-fers or would be 1 for 4, 2 for 5, just really low numbers. Out of his 63 games played in the regular season, he made 3 or more three-pointers 8 times. So you compare that to his teammate Danilo Gallinari, who played 12 less games than he did at 51, and he did it 15 times. So that 40% average looks good on paper, but it's not a very reliable shot. But he did really improve on his defenses last season. And while he wasn't a defensive stat stuffer, only blocking 1 shot a game and having half a steal, he made the right rotations and turned himself into a serviceable two-way big man. He got a lot of hate too, and people talk about, why can't he do more? And they never really focus on what John Collins can do for your team. He can stretch the floor. He's a rim runner. He can defend to a decent extent. And I'm not too sure if the Hawks make the Eastern Conference Finals without John Collins. Conversely, I'm not sure John Collins gets the max contract if the Hawks don't make the Eastern Conference Finals. But at this point, I'm looking forward to his continued progression this offseason. Hopefully he learns to get his own shot and continues that connection that he has with Trae. Moving on to the center position, where they're going to come in at 8th. Now, normally, I'd worry about a team without a shooting big man. My saying is you need 2 point guards and 1.5 centers. 1 center to rim protect, 1 to defend, and 1 to stretch the floor. Any center can have any combination of those 3 skills. But Nate McMillan was unafraid to trot out smaller lineups. Often I'd see John Collins or Danilo Gallinari, or both of them be on the floor without a true quote-unquote center. So they do have Clint Capella signed a contract extension this offseason, and now he's locked up through the 2024-2025 season on a somewhat team-friendly deal. It's not overly expensive. It peaks at the low 20s, so it is tradable if, say, Onyeka Okongwu turns into a beast. But Clint Capella, we all know who he is. He's a defensive thoroughbred. 4th in the league in blocks last season, cleaned up everybody's mess, most notably Trey Young, which I touched on before. If Clint Capella wasn't on this team, there was no chance that they had the success that they did in this last season. That's how important he is. That's how much of a defensive anchor Clint Capella is to the Atlanta Hawks. That said, we know who Clint Capella is. He has no ceiling. This is as good as he's going to be. He's going to defend, he's going to rim protect, he's going to rebound, and he's going to be the roll man on an alley-oop. You expect him or ask him to do anything else, and he's not going to be able to do it for you. Moving on to Onyeka Okongwu. He's injured, but it is looking good. They're planning on a mid-December return, which is, I think, a month earlier than they were expected when he first got hurt. He's another one of those undersized 6'8" centers. He had high energy, good rebounding, is a high-flying kid from last year's draft, has a noticeably freakish 7'1" wingspan, and he has good enough foot speed to switch on the perimeter. He's a great athlete. I think he had a 37-inch vertical in the combine, and while he only shot 3 threes this last season, his free throw form looks really decent, and I'm curious if he's going to be able to stretch the floor at some point. There are rumors of him taking jumpers last year, and that could be really good for a player that would justify taking him so high in the draft last year. I'm just not sure of his fit on the team other than being a good backup to Clint Capella, which I don't think that's what you target when you have a number 6 overall pick. He's undersized, so already his ceiling as a defender is lower than most. He can't shoot the 3. You draft him at a position that you're already set for the next, 5 years. It's just kind of a head scratching position that he's in. At the very least, though, he's going to be a good backup for the foreseeable future and maybe takes over in a couple years when Clint Capella starts to regress. Lastly, they brought in Gorgia Dang. He's fine. He can spread the floor. He shot well from 3 last year for the Grizzlies, less so for the Spurs, and he's at this point just a solid player in depth that can hold down the fort while the Hawks wait for Onyeka Okongwu to come back from injury. Moving on to the bench, where this team is going to come in at 25th, and that bench ranking I pull from last year's overall ratings that the bench has. I think it's a little misleading. This team is surprisingly deep. They run 2 and 3 deep at every position, and last year they just had to play Solomon Hill and Tony Snell a little too much. I think their never-ending battle with injuries is what really hindered them and brought them this low 25th overall ranking. First up is Danilo Gallinari, and he plays surprisingly well for him. He knows his role, and he gets you buckets. I thought he was going to be pushed out of the league after his stint in Oklahoma City, but he played very well for them, got them 13 points a game, 40% three-point shooting, and he has 2 years left on his $60 million deal he signed, but only $5 million is guaranteed in 2022. Hypothetically, this season, if somebody becomes available, you could do some price matching for some real superstar talent. They could target an elite wing player if one becomes available. He is 33 years old, and he had the worst playoff haircut in the history of the NBA, but he was key scoring for this bench. He started off the year rough. Pre-All-Star break, he was like 11 points a game at 59% true shooting, and then post-All-Star break, he really turned it on, gave him 14 points a game, 63% true shooting, and was a bucket getter. He played well in the pick and pop, was in the 98th percentile in pick and pop shooting possessions and offensive rating alongside Trey Young. He could also ISO a bit when needed, get you a bailout bucket. Danilo Gallinari was huge for this team. Also here is Lou Williams. They brought him back as well. He really found a home in the ATL after his mess in the bubble, after Lemon Pepper Lou, after getting traded away from the LA Clippers. He was about to retire, but they really embraced him here in Atlanta. He found a role. He gets you buckets off the bench, and it's good to see him finding a home, and hopefully he's going to have some more playoff success before he walks away from the game. Kevin Huerter is here. When he first was drafted, we were hyping him up as Klay Thompson 2.0 alongside Trey Young, who was Mr. Steph Curry 2.0. He's just not. He's not the same shooter. He's not the same defender, but he's still, kind of decent from 3 at 36% last year, which was a career low. So I guess you're expecting that to revert back to the mean. I was actually really impressed with him when he had like 5 straight possessions playing bully ball on Seth Curry in the Sixers series. I didn't know he had the skill set for that. And because this team is so deep, I think shooter-needy teams might be able to prime away from the Hawks with a future first. There's a lot of teams that are lacking quality shooters off the bench, and Kevin Huerter can fill a role for almost any team, if not be part of a trade package. Bring him, Danilo Gallinari, maybe one of the Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunters, and really go after some elite playmaking potential. And with the 20th pick in the draft, the Hawks took Jalen Johnson, and then literally in hour 1 of his training camp, day 1, he got hurt. He hurt his foot. Flashbacks to why he sat out the entire collegiate season. I was trying to confirm this. I think it was the right foot that he hurt at Duke. And if I remember correctly, it's been nagging him since high school days. So I'm assuming the Hawks are going to play this one close to the vest. And you might see a Michael Porter Jr.-esque Jalen Johnson sitting out the entire first season, focusing on developing the other players and focusing on him being healthy for not this upcoming season, but next year. I do like the pick, though. There's red flags everywhere for this kid, but it's a high risk, high reward kind of pick. He's a top 10 talent. And even with all the red flags, he was listed 11th on my big board. My blurb for him is obvious red flags on quitting the Duke team after only 13 games. That said, the NCAA was a scam of forced servitude anyway, so I can't really hate that, as well as he was rehabbing his foot injury. Red flag is a serious lack of defensive consistency. Some days he gives a shit, other days he doesn't. Red flag. He spent a lot of time coming off the bench and was not on the court in those close games that came down to the final minutes because of his ridiculous turnover rate. Red flag. He has a good post game and a bad post game. He makes incredible passes. He makes stupid passes. He has a good 3 and a bad free throw. He plays defense. He couldn't care less about defense. At his best, he'll need to bulk up a bit, but he could play the ball handling stretch 4 or small ball 5, making tough shots, distributing the ball, and causing havoc on defense. At his worst, he's a high injury turnover machine and liability on the defensive end with bad footwork, who's not fast enough to be a wing and not strong enough to bang in the post. Also here is former number 10 overall pick Cam Reddish. He hasn't really panned out yet. He's an awful shooter, shot 26% from 3 last year, actually regressed from his 33% in his rookie season. But like DeAndre Hunter, he's been suffering from injuries, played 58 games his rookie year, played 26 games last season. but he has still shown some flashes of elite ability. He had a career game in Game 6 versus the Bucks, went 6 for 7 from 3 after barely playing all season. Probably had the best game of his career offensively and defensively. He's a good defender. Can he stay healthy? Can he have some good consistency somewhere in between his poor regular season and his elite postseason? And we might be able to see some of that potential that Cam Reddish does have. And while the Hawks did get rid of Tony Snell, they did bring back Solomon Hill. He's here. For all the shit talking I do about Solomon Hill, I don't hate the guy. I just don't like the idea of giving up a roster spot to an undersized, low floor, low ceiling player that isn't going to give you much. Last season, he played 71 games for this team. 71 games, 21 minutes a night, and gave you 4.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist on 32% shooting from 3, 36% from the field. Just what's his best traits? He's strong. He didn't get hurt. He's an average NBA defender and a bad offensive player. So I guess he's depth for the team. Sure. They also have Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot. He's the final roster spot right now, but he could get cut with $0 guaranteed dollars, so he's kind of on an exhibition deal along with Jahlil Okafor, Johnny Hamilton, and AJ Lawson. He's still a bad shooter, shot 31% from 3 last year, 36% from the field, and had a horrible 49% true shooting. He's maybe an average defender, 0.7 win shares, had a negative 1.7 defensive plus minus, and a negative 0.8 value over replacement player. Basically, he's depth like Solomon Hill, can't shoot, decent defender. Jahlil Okafor is here on an exhibition training camp contract. The center room is a little bit crowded, especially when Okongwu comes back, and either Apella, Okongwu, or Dang will play the 4 with much success. So I'm really expecting Jahlil to get cut unless we think the injury to Okongwu is worse than we thought. And while Jahlil Okafor has never lived up to that number 3 overall selection, he's still a decent big-bodied center that can bang in the paint. He's not a great defender. He's not great on offense outside of 5 feet. He can't stretch the floor. And I was dumbstruck, honestly, reading that he was only 25. Like, holy crap, this dude feels like he's been a veteran bouncing around the league for like 15 years. They also have Johnny Hamilton on this exhibition contract. He's a big 7-foot guy from Trinidad. Again, he could be some depth if Okongwu gets set back in his recovery. If, one of the other guys get hurt and if they don't go for Jahlil Okafor. As for Johnny Hamilton, he's a big, high-flying rim protector. He's a little older at 27 years old, and he doesn't really offer you much offensively. He's like a poor man's Clint Capella, I guess. Lastly is AJ Lawson. My money's on either him or Jahlil Okafor getting this final roster spot. Or AJ Lawson. I actually had him confused with Ty Lawson, so fuck me. AJ Lawson is an undrafted rookie. He's a 3-year player out of South Carolina, a solid shooter. He's a little wiry, 6'6", only 180 pounds. He is a decent looking shooter. He's just not very athletic. He's like a 3-and-D guy, but he only shot 35% from the 3, so not great 3. He doesn't have a very good foot speed, so not great D, hence why he went undrafted and is looking for a contract. Lastly here is Skylar Mays. He's also on a 2-way deal. And while Skylar did get a lot of minutes last year, I wasn't really impressed with him. He's kind of sneakily though, like DeLon Wright. He's taller, he can score to some extent, and is more of a combo guard than a point guard. I don't really expect much from him, especially being a big believer in the Sharif Cooper experiment. So I guess Skylar's going to play on the 2-way deal, be in the G League, develop, maybe something comes from him, but I don't expect it to happen. Moving on to the front office where they're going to come in at 13th. And while the Atlanta Hawks have been a laughingstock of the NBA, perennially in the lottery for the longest time, they've quietly been building a nice culture here. They've been stockpiling talent. Trey Young, 5th overall pick. Okongwu, 6th overall pick. DeAndre Hunter, 4th overall pick. Cam Reddish, 10th overall pick. Kevin Huerter and John Collins, 19th overall picks, but very successful. They had a complete turnaround with Nate McMillan. I had him as my runner-up coach of the year last season while nobody even had him on their radar because, Tom Thibodeau is going to win because the NBA prioritizes big market teams. But when Nate McMillan took over the reins of head coaching, the turnaround was legit. It was unreal. Lloyd Pierce, for whatever reason, just didn't work out. He had a bad string of luck being the head coach of a rebuilding team, and then hung around when COVID hit and dealt with all those problems. And then the Hawks were slammed by injuries in the past few years, and he's made some late game coaching mistakes, bench rotation issues, and the team had some serious blow-in fourth quarter lead problems as well. But he gave Trey Young the unlimited range green light. He brought him along in his progression. A lot of these guys developed nicely while Lloyd Pierce was here. But by all reports, Lloyd Pierce is a good man and he's well respected in the NBA, just wasn't a great coach. Hopefully he's going to go and be a great assistant somewhere. Maybe learn, continue to progress as a head coach and get a second shot on another franchise. Nate McMillan, aka only pick and roll Nate, took over and the flip was immediate. They were 14-20 with Lloyd Pierce, 27-11 with Nate McMillan. Plus, they went 10-8 in the playoffs. The team fully embraced Nate. The ATL fully embraced Nate, and he's going to be here for a long time after that contract extension. The GM, Travis Schlenk, what a weird fucking last name he has, but I'm really down with this vision. He's been GM since I think 2017, and you can tell that they have a plan. They have a goal. They have an understanding of who they are and what kind of team they're going to put on the floor, and it brought them to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. I was also impressed with the ownership when they handed out that contract extension to Clint Capella. It means basically that they're all in. They're going to be willing to pay the luxury tax. They're going to be willing to go over to do what it takes to win. So when those contracts start coming up, John Collins got paid. Trey Young got paid. Clint Capella got paid. Kevin Huerter's going to be up next. Danilo Gallinari is earning $20 million a year. DeAndre Hunter's going to need to get paid. Cam Reddish is going to need to get paid. They have a lot of talent here that's going to command a lot of money, and it looks like ownership is ready to do what it takes to win a championship. Moving on to their season projections, where they're going to come in at 46.5 wins, have pretty decent odds at 25-1, and I have them as a 4th-seeded second-round exit this upcoming season. Now, I've said this before, 3 through 10 in the East is going to be highly competitive. We know the Nets, when healthy and even when unhealthy, are unstoppable. The Bucks earn their respect with the championship, but the rest of the division, 3 through 10, isn't that far apart. The 76ers, who knows what they're going to do with Ben Simmons. The New York Knicks are getting better. The Miami Heat got better. The Boston Celtics are a wild card. The Hornets should only get better with LaMelo Ball. The Pacers, the Bulls got tremendously better. There's a lot of teams competing for those middle to late playoff seedings in the Eastern Conference. And the Hawks are right on the cusp, I believe, of being another championship team. I think, though, that they have Trey Young. They have a good enough core around them. They just need another all-star wing, somebody who's going to get you buckets, somebody who could take over the game alongside Trey Young. I think that means an elite wing player. That means either through development of one of their existing guys, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, or a nice trade with Gallinari, with Kevin Huerter, with some of those contracts that they have. I think they're one move away from pushing themselves over the top. And that is the Atlanta Hawks, going to come in at 12th. Again, hugely impressive season last year. Very quiet offseason. They're going to run it back again, and we'll really see if the Hawks were legit or they just had a one-off good luck season. Let me know what you think, what you agree with, what you disagree with, and I'll catch you in the next one where we unveil the 11th ranked team.